Go ahead.
Okay. Wait, I have this. Okay. So, for example, in Spain, during Franco's dictatorship, they burnt Catalan books because Catalan was the language spoken in Catalonia, in Barcelona, in those places, and it was forbidden. The language was forbidden. They also burnt The Republic by Plato because the rivals of Franco's dictatorship were the Republicans. And so The Republic by Plato was burnt, and also Little Red Riding Hood because of the color of the hood. It was seen as related to communism. So this shows you also how ignorant they were and paranoid. So Italy, Mussolini in Italy, Japanese burned Chinese libraries, the Nazis, then also the Allies had a lot of, when the Allies bombed Germany, many libraries, many museums, many universities were destroyed, and so many books disappeared. This is something in 1948 in Birobidzhan, Stalin also burned 30,000 books of Judaica collection. And also this is something we should know because, as I told you before, perpetrators and victims alternate. And so we should know that also within the Jewish community, there are people who burn books. So in 1954, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, who was the father of Reconstructionist branch of Judaism, he was excommunicated from Orthodox Judaism in the United States, and his works were publicly burned also. Then in Brazil during the dictatorship, just for you to know, most of the countries in Latin America had dictatorships in the 60s and the 70s, in different times, but in those 2 decades. And so in all the dictatorships in Latin America, there were book burnings and also missing people. That is for another talk. But then during the Cultural Revolution in China, they burned anti-communist books. And during the dictatorships in Latin America, at the same time, they burned communist books. So another hilarious anecdote, in 1973, the Chilean dictatorship, Pinochet, he ordered to burn Marxist books, communist books. And so soldiers went to the house of Pablo Neruda, who was a Chilean poet, very well-known Chilean poet, that he said that he belonged to the Communist Party. And so they went to his house and they found books on Cubism. And of course, Cubism is an artistic movement. He was a poet, and he liked painting and sculpture. And so he had books on Cubism. But the soldiers thought that Cubism was related to Cuba. And so they burnt the books on Cubism that were in the house of Pablo Neruda. So again, ignorance and paranoid. Then in Argentina, also during our last dictatorship that went from 1976 to 1983, many people burnt their own books because it was like a kind of self-censorship, because people knew that they had books in their libraries at home that could be seen as suspicious or dangerous by the government. And so they burned their own books. And in some cases, for the smoke not to be seen by other people, they dunked books in water in the bathtubs at home to pulp them and to destroy them without using fire. In 1980, also a Jewish Orthodox group burned copies of the New Testament in Israel. This is the other side of the story. And also the satanic verses. I'm sure you remember Salman Rushdie, who was condemned to death because he wrote a book. And last year, I think he was stabbed. He was not killed, but he was injured after so many years. Then, well, in Sarajevo, the Serbian army also burned books of the Bosnian Herzegovina library. So many different book burnings and other events that have to do with killings and making people disappear, all during mainly dictatorships, but also during democratic governments. This quote is also by Ray Bradbury, is also in Fahrenheit 451. If you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to a question to worry him. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. So this is the idea of these authoritarian governments, to make people ignorant, to have ignorant people so that they can tell them what to think. They say, well, don't think, we do it for you. We know what is best for you. This is what dictators and authoritarian rulers try to do. And another thing is that the unifying factor between all types of book burners is that perpetrators in general present themselves as victims, even if they are the ones in power. That is the common thing to happen. For example, Hitler and the Nazis regularly said that they were the victims of the Jews. They employed language establishing that idea, that the Jews were dangerous, that they were trying to ruin the German culture, spoil or destroy Germany. So they have to defend themselves from the Jews by killing them. That is very common. The same thing happened with Mao during the Cultural Revolution in China, the Communist Revolution. The capitalism or everything that was anti-communist was dangerous. With Franco, the same thing. The communists were the dangerous ones, so we had to defend ourselves. And in Latin American dictatorships, the same thing happens. The problem is that you may think that communism is a threat, but the problem here, at least with Franco, with all these dictatorships, is that the remedy was worse than the disease, because they killed a lot of people. They make a lot of people disappear, their own people in many cases, in the Latin American dictatorships. For example, our military people fought against our own people because they thought that they were dangerous, because they thought that they were left-wing or communist, and that was dangerous for our way of life. Okay, so let me show you some other examples that you're going to remember. Other events or of censorship or attacks, not burnings, but other events. I'm sure you remember this group, the Beatles. In 1966, well, they were, of course, very famous, and everyone knew them, and many people followed them and were fans. But in 1966, John Lennon said, "We are more popular than Jesus now." And many people started to burn their records and to make demonstrations against the band because of what he said. This is just to show you some things that, this is a book burning, record burning. Beatles must face moment of truth now, of truth soon. Beatle burning here, dump trash here, Beatle bonfires after heresy quote. And in the middle of all these violent and aggressive quotes, God is love. Okay, so I'm sure you remember these three brothers, the Bee Gees. Also in the late 70s, disco music was the most popular music genre in the United States, in many countries, but especially in the United States, particularly after being featured in Saturday Night Fever in the film in 1977. And so there was a war between rock fans and disco fans. So rock fans hated disco music. And disco music roots were in African American and Latin American music, and also in gay culture. And so this man, Steve Dahl, who was a radio presenter, do you remember him? Well, then you'll tell me. He was a radio presenter in Chicago, and he held something that was called the Disco Demolition Night, this event, on July the 12th, 1979. He started an anti-disco campaign together with the White Sox. There was going to be a discount on the ticket for those attendees who took disco records to Comiskey Park, the stadium, to burn the records during halftime of the game. So people went there with their records, disco records, to have the discount on the ticket. During halftime, they provoked an explosion to destroy the records in the middle of the field. And this led to riots, and they couldn't even finish the game. There is a documentary that tells this story. And in the documentary is called How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? That is the story about the Bee Gees, but they tell also this story. In the documentary, there is a black man who was a teenager at the time when this happened, and he used to work in Comiskey Park. And he didn't like disco music. So he was okay with these people bringing the disco records to burn. But he says in the documentary that as people were arriving with their records to burn, he realized that many of them were not disco records, but music performed by Black artists or African-American music. And that struck him. So this is why I'm telling you that there are always people, this is a flyer of the Disco Demolition Night, there are always people waiting in the shadows to find a leader that encourages violence and hate, and they support him and act in consequence, no matter what the motto is. I always say to my kids and to other teenagers, if you are part of a demonstration or a protest, it's okay, but look around. Who are the other protesters? What are they saying? What is written on the signs they carry? Do you agree with it? With their ways, with their attitudes, with their ideas? Are you sure you are all there for the same aim? There are always people eager to channel violence into something, and they find leaders that encourage violence to follow them, to support them. And sometimes you get involved in something that you don't like. During the 21st century, this is a list, of course, as I told you before, it's not enough, it's not complete, but just for you to see how many different countries in different years and for different reasons. The US flag and Frank's diary, the New Testament, the Quran, books on gender ideology, well, Tintin in America, because they say in Canada that it is discrimination against African-American people, Harry Potter and the Twilight series in Poland, but also in many other countries, books on sex, Masonic books, The Handmaid's Tale, Harry Potter, and then also in Ukraine, they are burning now Russian books. Of course, not everything is lost because there are reactions against book burnings. This is a monument designed by Micha Ullman, an Israeli sculptor. This is a monument that is in Bebelplatz, where the book burning in 1933 took place. Through a plastic window on the ground of Bebelplatz, it is possible to see this library with white empty shelves, as if they were paying tribute to the books that were burned. Also, this is a quote by Roosevelt: "Books are weapons in the war of ideas. Books cannot be killed by fire." There was a German Freedom Library in Paris that was studied in 1934 by Alfred Kantorowicz. But then when the Germans invaded Paris, it was destroyed. There is an American library of Nazi banned books that was started in 1934 also. Now it's in the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York City. It was moved from a Brooklyn center where it was before. In my country, in Argentina, in the province of Córdoba, there is a library of forbidden books. And there is a new one in Sweden, in Malmö, the David Isaac Library of Forbidden Books. There are many more. These libraries are agents of cultural memory. It is very important to keep these books, to read these books. And sometimes it's interesting to read them just to find out what was the problem with those books, because sometimes you cannot even find the dangerous thing in the book, what they consider to be dangerous. This is, of course, an irony. These are campaigns against book burnings. This is Margaret Atwood, that is a writer of The Handmaid's Tale. And here it says, "How did we get here? Margaret Atwood has had to release a fireproof copy of The Handmaid's Tale." Of course, it's a joke, but it's a campaign against book burnings. Of course, a book that was targeted many times and removed from schools many times and also burned many times is Anne Frank's diary. It was censored, banned, and also burned many times in different countries. It has always been the target of Holocaust deniers. And the excuses to ban the book from schools, even today, is that it is depressing, that the book is depressing, and that it has sexually explicit material. Just remember, Anne Frank was a teenager that was telling things that happened to her in captivity. And so, you know, sexually explicit material. And it's depressing. Of course, it's depressing. She was, you know, kept in a room in silence. Well, you know the story. I don't have to tell you. Some schools consider ideas about sex, LGBT rights, human rights, or the Holocaust as inappropriate subjects for their students. They say that students don't have to read those terrible things. The same happened with Maus. Maus, written by Art Spiegelman. This is the story of his parents that were survivors of the Holocaust. The characters are presented as animals, depending on if they were Jewish or Polish or German Nazis. So Maus was banned from schools in Tennessee and in other places too, also because it is too sad and because it shows nudity images. Just imagine, they are animals, mice, cats, pigs. So it is a cartoon. What about Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck? They are also naked, and nobody said a word about that. So the excuses to ban Holocaust books are that they are violent, that they are depressing, that they are too explicit. We live in an increasingly intolerant society. People don't want to feel uncomfortable. They don't want to see these depressing, terrible, sad stories, sad things. Holocaust books and Holocaust films are violent, brutal, humiliating, uncomfortable to see, and they should be, because this is what really happened. It's not fiction. So when a book is banned, and this is the irony, everyone wants to read it. And so Maus became #1 in Amazon. So the problem is there. There is where we have a problem, because kids read these books anyway, but without the guidance of a teacher or an adult, because they are forbidden, or there is something hidden. And so they read it, the books alone. And it is much better if these materials are seen at school or in the family with the guidance of a teacher. So this reminded me of another quote from Fahrenheit 451. Give the people contests they win by remembering the words to more popular songs, or the names of state capitals, or how much corn Iowa grew last year. Cram them full of non-combustible data. Chock them so dumped full of facts they feel stuffed, but absolutely brilliant with information. Then they will feel they are thinking. They will get a sense of motion without moving, and they will be happy because facts of that sort don't change. Don't give them any slippery stuff like philosophy or sociology to tie things up with. This is in Fahrenheit 451. And this is another quote by Voltaire: dare to think for yourselves. This quote summarizes all the ideas in this presentation and takes us back to the beginning. Our ignorance is their power. So this, unfortunately, book bannings, book burnings, censorship goes on, is still happening. And there are many people, old people, my parents that are 80 something, and some 90-year-old people that say, I wouldn't believe it if I weren't seeing it, that this is still happening today. And it's not only still happening, but it is increasing. And so this is why I started this investigation, and I want to show this presentation to many people. But there are also many controversies, because I'm sure that I don't know you, but I'm sure that you are against book burning and book censorship. But what happens if you find out that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, or Mein Kampf, is part of the curriculum of the high schools or universities in your cities, or in your universities, or in your country? What would you say about that? Should they be censored? Should they be banned? Should students read them? This is the end of the presentation. I am going to this is just, if you want to take pictures of, you have all this recorded. So these are some links and some books to find out more things and more events and more interesting things about book burning and book banning. And now, if you want, I want to hear if you have some opinions or questions or whatever you want to share with me.
All right. Well, I want to start out by saying thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you. I will. Okay. Thank you.
kicking myself because I had paused the recording at the beginning and didn't start it again until halfway through. But I have a habit of doing that. So I want to open up the floor to anyone who has questions or comments. And if you're having trouble hearing, I'll just repeat them into our microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Steve.
Claudia, thank you much. I would hope that because of the internet, it'd be much harder to destroy books which are physical items. It would be easier to destroy a library because there's no coming back from it. But with the internet, it's very, very hard to eliminate. The best example is pornography. That shows you just can't get rid of things that you may think are bad.
Mm-hmm. It's true, but as I told you before, even if you have all these copies and you can find all these books online, the symbolic act of banning a book or censoring a book or canceling a book or burning a book is very, very strong, very powerful.
Lloydell?
Yeah, and I just wanted to relate it to a lot of what you were saying, because we are facing the issue of banning books in schools.
Yeah.
And there is a big long list of books that are banned. I'm in a banned book reading club. And we are reading, it's very interesting to me because we are currently reading Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin, which is now 70 years old. And the book was banned when it came out, and it's banned now. It was banned because it dealt with, you know, issues of questioning religion and homosexuality and, you know, that kind of thing. And now it's being banned for the same reason again. And it's on our reading list now. In my book club. But so that's the form that it's taking. And not only in the high schools, but of course, you know, this whole thing about gay people coming in, and people who have children and grandchildren probably know about this, that come into the libraries and give presentations, and they're trying to ban that.
Right.
And I mean, they have been successful in many states. And it's just part of the whole onslaught, and which has led to the murder of many trans people in this country. So that's how it's, I mean, that's just a 1 minute summation of how it's manifesting itself in this country. And we don't have to worry about burning books. I mean, you know, we're too busy banning ideas in the schools. So, you know, what are our grandchildren going to be dealing with, and how are they going to reckon that when they get out in the real world? You know, it's a real issue.
Yes.
And
Anyway, yes. Sorry. No, go on.
I mean, I just wanted to relate it because I think you had a wonderful, exhaustive list of the history of book burning and banning. And today, you know, at least here, you know, they don't have to burn anything. I mean, and we're skipping over the stage of censorship. We're just killing people.
Well, I also think that book burning is so symbolic and deemed throughout history, especially today, as such an atrocious act, that by simply banning the books, they're not doing something as egregious as burning them. But it certainly is, but they're getting away with it because it's not this horrible act of actually burning the books.
Right.
It's the same effect, but
Right.
but they're getting away with it.
Right. And when we were in high school and books were banned, and I remember here, there were many books banned at the Doubleday Bookshop. That was the surest way to go read that book. If you wanted to ban Peyton Place, boy, we couldn't wait to get our hands on it, or The Joy of Sex. I can think of all these books that I read with my girlfriends. Her grandfather had all these books, and we'd go out to his summer home and get on the, you know, on the bed and read these books, and, you know, between us. And I mean, of course, ban a book to a teenager, you're gonna want to read that book.
Right.
Of course. So I wouldn't be, worried about your grandchildren, because I'm sure they are going to read those books, because it's backfire. You ban the book and all the teenagers and children want to read it. The problem is that in some cases, as I told you before, it's better if they read them with some guidance. But it depends on the book anyway.
So I was wondering in your research if you saw any trends in terms of timing for these upsurges of book burnings in different areas.
Trends in what? In
like causation, the trends in society that led to these types of burnings, if it was like an up and down kind of.
Well, in general, it takes place, first of all, during authoritarian governments. That is not what it is happening now. For example, we are not having book bannings or book burnings or censorship here in Argentina as you have in the United States now. We had those things during the dictatorship. And so we relate that with the dictatorship. The same happened in Asian countries, and it's still happening. In China, they are still having book bannings and burnings because they are still under a dictatorship. But that surprises me in the United States that it is happening during a democratic government, under a democratic government. And I think that it has to do with this not having any restriction or limit with some liberties. For example, all this, it surprises me a lot, all these actors and actresses that are being canceled because they played a role of a homosexual not being a homosexual or something like that. This is like, it's going too far. And so you can, for example, I'm mixing things, but in the United States, as I heard, being a parent, you can report a book or say, I don't want that book to be in the library, even if you didn't read it.
Yeah.
That is incredible.
It is
But
incredible.
the problem here is that you can choose for your son or your daughter not to read that book, but you cannot make all the university or all the high school or all the class not being able to read that book. Yeah. That is what surprises me. Because one parent wants to cancel the book, all the children in that class or that school cannot read that book. And that is like saying the school is more powerful than the family, than the parents. You know, it's illogical for me. I don't know. I don't see a trend. The only trend I see is that this is happening in the United States, that is said to be the country of freedom. Yeah. And so it's as if they are taking the freedom of banning as more powerful than the freedom of reading. Something like that. I think that I don't know if you heard of, for example, people saying in the Quran, it says that the Muslims can kill all or should kill all the people who are not Muslims. I heard this many times, but I haven't read the Quran. And I'm sure the people who said that didn't read the Quran either. And so this is, well, fake news, we know. But so in some cases, I think that instead of banning some books, we should read them responsibly to know what is written in them and to look for ways to confront them, even if we don't like that book. For example, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion that I was telling you before, I haven't read the book. I know that it's terrible. They say terrible things about the Jews, but I haven't read the book. And so I am going to read it. I cannot find it here, but if I find it, I want to read it to be able to defend myself, to confront the people who say something against me, against the Jews, against Judaism. We have to know, not to ignore. We have to read more, not less.
Right.
This is what I think. But okay, I don't know.
Do we have any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
I think people read less and less these days, you know.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's true. Only texts and WhatsApp messages.
It's very scary with the younger generation, and even I see it in people my age who used to be prolific readers. We've become this society of short blurbs. You know, your attention span is for a short story, a paragraph or two, or maybe a few, but not to sit down and immerse yourself in a full book anymore. And that is frightening, because those short readings are so edited, and it's not the complete story. People are not getting the full ideas. They're not able to really enjoy the beauty of sussing out a concept throughout a book, a novel, or whatever. And they're limited. These short readings are very limited and designed for specific audiences.
And I think there's also the idea that if you don't read the horrible things that are going on, you're not affected by them. You kind of blind yourself to reality of real life.
Right, well, that is the concept of so many politicians who are saying that it's too depressing to read this book.
Exactly.
Who are you protecting? If you don't know the past, how will you learn from those mistakes from the past? I mean, that is such an important lesson in life. Learn from the mistakes of the past. Don't let history repeat itself.
Right.
But if you shield everyone from the atrocities of slavery and the Holocaust and all of these dark issues, then people won't know how horrible they were.
Yeah.
So
And even nowadays, there are horrible things happen. You don't have to go back
Right.
to the Holocaust.
it's all happening today. Look at what's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen a film, an old one? It's not a good film, but it's worth watching it. Idiocracy. Have you seen it?
Idiocracy. I've heard of it and I have never seen it, but I heard it
Well,
actually is very good.
I saw it a long time ago, but it's this what you are saying. It's the tendency for people to stay at home watching TV all day long and eating popcorn, not getting up or not even walking, and just believing in what the TV shows them. And that is also on top of it, that a lot of people think that if it's on TV or if it's in the internet, it's the truth.
Right, well, this has been the problem in this country.
Yes.
With false fake news.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.